am I going to be talking about a film in this video. 2018's Possum. I saw a trailer for this a few weeks ago, either scrolling through YouTube or on Facebook, I don't remember. But I saw a trailer for this, and I thought it looked super interesting. I read up about it on Wikipedia and whatnot, found out a little more what it was about, and I could not wait to see it. Finally picked it up, and yes, I do know that elevated horror is a thing. People like to say it's not, but it is. I don't know if this is considered an elevated horror film, but it is as well written and pulled off and executed, well made. The performances, there's really only 2 performances in this entire film. As, pick an elevated horror film, as Lighthouse, Babadook, even Hereditary, but I like the ending to this better. I even love that cover. It just, I don't even know where to begin with this film. This is the best horror film I've seen recently. It was directed by Matthew Holness, who also wrote the screenplay, based on a short story of his of the same name, which was collected in a book called The New Uncanny, which was it's an anthology book, The New Uncanny Tales of Unease, because there was a series of books called The Uncanny with all these sort of twisted tales. There's even a British anthology horror film by Amicus called The Uncanny. Put it out through Dark Sky, and yeah, it's a British film. It's a psychological horror film. A very, very, very slow burn. I can already tell a lot of people are going to hate on this the same way they hate on The Witch, Lighthouse, any film like that, because it's slow, because it does build up, because it relies on atmosphere, tension, performances. This is not a popcorn horror film. And I've said this before, can we cool it on the garbage and trash? Like, I know everyone has their opinion, but to be like, I saw The Witch and it was trash. It was so slow. Trash? Do you know what trash cinema is? Even if you don't like The Witch, it's not trash. But Possum. So the influences on this film are worthy of mentioning because they're very prevalent. It was inspired by silent films, particularly the German Expressionist films, which you can definitely see in this. George Romero's Martin, the 1945 anthology film Dead of Night, which I do own. I'm saving my anthologies for the month of October. And it really does do, also Nosferatu. I do see a lot of German Expressionists in this film, and I love it for that. I love German Expressionist film. That's why I love Begotten. I thought Begotten was a great movie as well. Also, The Innocents and Don't Look Now was another influence. And supposedly, because this does deal with sort of reliving and having to get rid of, baggage, as we call it, trauma, it's sort of based on some theories by Freud, which is very interesting. And it also reminded me a lot of Eraserhead, just because there's very little dialogue. I mean, you really just get Sean Harris. Sean Harris plays this guy named Philip. and his uncle, Alan Armstrong. They're really the only actors in this film. And a lot of the film is Philip just walking around aimless. Well, not aimlessly, but he's just walking around. And it is very much like the opening to Eraserhead when he's walking through the industrial landscape. Or in Begotten, where we have the Mother of Earth walking through the landscape. And the way it's shot in 35 millimeter, so it looks beautiful. The cinematography is so gorgeous to look at. Lots of really wide shots of him just walking along, especially scenes where it's around like sunset and there's like a field. Those scenes are just so beautiful to see. I will get to the score. The score is the best of its kind since It Follows, which is another elevated horror film people like to shit on. It's so boring. Nothing happens. Well, go watch your Paranormal Activity where nothing happens there either. Like the score, there's so many different styles of music used, and each one fits the scene perfectly. Like, when you get to this scene, I guess I should explain what Possum is first. So, Philip is a former children's puppeteer of some sort. A children's presenter on some level. He is fired and disgraced for a reason that's never discussed. We can assume by how some people look at him and just his demeanor possibly has something to do with the children. It doesn't go into detail. I'm not saying that is what it is, but... And one of his puppets is a puppet named Possum, which is this spider-like puppet. It's like long sticks for spider legs, and it has this white head, this white bald head with big eyes. Obviously they don't blink, just an open mouth. It is fucking creepy looking. Suppose this Possum, I think, represents all of his trauma. He had a very traumatic childhood. And after being fired from his job, he goes back to his childhood home, which is now dilapidated. It's pretty much the Fight Club house. And he's there with his Uncle Morris, who is not a good person. And throughout most of the movie, he's walking around with this bag with Possum in it, trying to get rid of it. He goes to these different areas, out in the woods, to this old water treatment plant. He goes to all these places, but he just can't seem to get rid of it. And he's always carrying this thing around, and this thing provides most of the scares. There is one jump scare in this whole film. Like, real legit jump scares, but it is earned. I'm not going to get much into the plot because, I mean, it really is, okay. Shortly after he arrives to his house, this young boy goes missing. And because it was a boy that he saw on a train, I think, a train or a bus. And people seem to think it was Philip. And he is just... It's like Eraserhead because he's going through these hallucinations and nightmares. He's literally on the brink of insanity. He cannot tell what is real, what is not, what's haunting him, what's a nightmare. And what I was going to say about this before was, like, the music for this is when it gets its biggest, its loudest, its creepiest. There's also some very little, like, John Carpenter, just, like, subtle, like, boom, 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 boom. There's one early on with, like, a very soft piano or guitar, something like, boo, do, 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 do. It just keeps building up, and it gets, like, heavy, lower keys on a piano as it builds up. Excellent score. So he can't get rid of Possum. He's haunted by all these... There are several things about his childhood that have been traumatic, that he sort of relives through these hallucinations. And it all builds up to the climax. One of which has something to do with a fox. Well, actually, I'll get to that in spoilers. I don't want to spoil this film. I highly recommend it, but, you know, if you need something going on in your films, like, if you don't like slow burns, you're not going to like this. And if you're one of those people, I guess, that says horror is people getting killed with blood or ghosts. I mean, someone dies in this, but it's not a slasher film. And the supernatural shit is all psychological. It's a psychological horror film. It is a very slow burn, but there's this sense of dread, foreboding, just every time he walks around and the music builds, and Sean Harris's performance, where he has very little dialogue, it is a very physical performance. It's all in his facial expressions, his body language, the way he walks. He's a very shy, awkward loner. He has an awkward walk. He's always, like, running away from things. And his uncle just keeps bringing up just things about his childhood and just talking about how much of a man he isn't. And for a while, I thought, actually I'll save that for spoilers as well, but he also wrote children's books, one of which was Possum, and we hear the sort of children's poetry over voiceover, like the tagline, "Can you spy him deep within? Little Possum, black as sin." We do see him flipping through one of his hand-drawn books, which is Possum, and it looks just like this. Just a black and white, Tim Burton-y, silent film, horror-looking story. Loved the look of it. Kind of like the Babadook, but I like the look of this book more. And then just that damn Possum. Like, there are scenes where, like, just imagine that white face with the big eyes and the open mouth. Just, it'll be shrouded by darkness, but you'll just see that face there. Or, like, it'll show him looking down a hallway, and the hallway's not there. And then it will cut back to Philip, and then when it cuts back to the hallway, just that head will just kind of be peeking out down the dark hall. Fucking creepy. This movie had some very well made, you know, the scares are more of a creep factor than jump scares or anything like that. And it is kind of unsettling because this guy's, you know, going through this. He's having these nightmares, and I know I sound like shit. I blew my nose before this fucking video, and I can't fucking win. Also, real quick, the opening credits, it's like pictures of the house and pictures of him, but it's this really degraded, I would say black and white, but it's like green, like this green tint, like silent film looking. So I'm gonna get into spoilers, but this movie is it's got a wonderful, methodical pace. It is just a continuous build-up. The score is unlike anything else I've heard. It's a score like It Follows, all different kinds of music. Fits the scene very well. It builds with the scene. Excellent performance by Sean Harris. This little puppet is fucking creepy as all hell. And just with his hallucinations and nightmares, it really makes it creates wonderful scares. Rue Morgue says stunning, a true horror film. I agree. I loved this fucking movie. And if you do check it out and you don't like slow burns, sit through it anyway. It's worth it through the ending. The revelation at the end makes the whole movie worth it. Yeah, it's kind of bleak. Yeah, it's kind of anticlimactic. But, just try to sit your ass down and watch it. Slow movies can be good. You don't have to have Fast and Furious in front of you all the time. But anyway, so highly recommend it. I loved this movie. Very well made. I wish there were more horror movies like this and not like Blumhouse, where they actually give a fuck about performances, stories, editing, cinematography. It's an actual film, not just a product. So, spoilers. For a while, I thought the twist was going to be that Uncle Morris is not even there. Because he has this otherworldly quality to him. It's like Philip will be in the house, and then Uncle Morris will just start talking, and he'll be there. It's not like we see him do a lot. He's always sitting there eating or reading or talking to Philip. I thought it was going to be like a Jiminy Cricket kind of, sort of like a spiritual guide. But no, it turns out he is there. And right when it gets, and it's like he's trying to put the idea that, yeah, you did kidnap that kid. Because at one point, he even throws Possum in the fire. But he still keeps seeing him. And he's like, I burnt Possum. I burnt it. Like, you were there with me. And he's like, you're crazy. We didn't do that. Come to find out, well, the thing about the fox I said earlier, he keeps seeing this fox. Then eventually he sees the fox dead, continues walking, and when he turns around, the fox is standing there. And the dialogue is very soft. It feels natural. They speak very naturally. So it feels very soft and quiet. And with their thick British accents, it can be hard to hear sometimes. But something to the effect of, I think when he was in school, some sort of lesson with a fox, and he says he came in to teach that lesson. He was like scared of, didn't we? Whatever that might have been. I'm sure someone will not only tell me in the comments, but explain the whole movie to me. Even though that's the one part I'm not sure about. So then, on top of that, he starts to beat Philip. He gets on top of him. He starts slapping him around. We find out he wasn't just abused. Very possibly he was sexually abused. I mean, he takes his gloves off. He makes him open his mouth so he can stick his fingers down his throat. He belts him across the ass a bunch of times. If he cries, he'll start over. And that's when we find out Uncle Morris kidnapped the child at the beginning of the film. And he says, pretty much told Philip, because of the way you are, they're going to think it's you. And even more so to add to the, implication of sexual assault, Philip turns, rolls over, gets on top of him, starts, holding him, and he says something like, you can't fight me. And then he looks at him, he's like, you feel that? But he ends up pushing and snapping his neck. And he finds his briefcase. And when he opens it, it's the boy. And he runs off. and then the film ends. So it's a little anticlimactic, and it doesn't really say what's gonna happen, but I loved this. The, I'm a big fan of cinematography, and the way this was shot on 30 millimeter, with all of its wide shots and the landscapes and just the dilapidated house, and you know, it's a gorgeous looking horror film. The performances are absolutely stellar. Two performances. Occasionally Uncle Morris comes up, but Sean Harris is in almost every scene. And he has to carry this film mostly with very little dialogue. And he does it very well. I love the look of Possum. Again, that white base, how it will just pop up in the dark. I mean, there's one scene where Philip walks into a room. We see him walk into a room, but he stands in the doorway. The camera kind of pans back, and we see a mirror on the wall. And in the reflection on the opposite wall, Possum is hanging there. But it looks like this pale-faced person is like standing in the corner of the room. I like slow burns anyway, but I really love and appreciate not just slower films, but ones that take its time to create the scare, create character development, so that we can be immersed in this world with them. So, the scares are more scary. It is more atmospheric, which this movie has a ton of atmosphere. And also, like Eraserhead, it has this otherworldly quality. Like, it's not of this place. Just, I don't really know how to explain it. But also just the setting with the dilapidated house. It's also, I also love to see where it rains black ink on him. That's in the trailer. I did hear one reviewer say, it looks cold. He's always wearing a jacket. There's always like overcast and clouds. It's fall. And yeah, it is one of those heavily atmospheric films where you can feel the chill. You feel the isolation. I was very impressed by Possum. I thought this was so well made. As far as for the past decade, it's going up there with the two Robert Eggers films. It's up there with Lighthouse and The Witch for this past decade. Superbly made. And I know people can say, it's not horror because there's no murder. Which, yes, someone dies, but nothing happens, so it's not horror. And I watch things like Bye Bye Man. Alright, I'm just going to stop now. Possum, excellent movie. Thoroughly impressed. I loved it. But anyway, thank you for watching.